We're going to switch gears a little bit in this fourth episode of Shadows and Storylines. I've told you a little bit about my background, and I'll continue to do that as time goes along. But right now, I wanted to talk about my filming process and my trips that I take to film for the podcast and the videos, mostly American Shadows and The Wandering Rider as it comes back in a new form. And I talk a little bit about The Wandering Rider. It's going to be more of a raw kind of video, and you'll be able to hear the raw audio, even though I have it turned down a little bit. I'm going to do commentary over it so I can give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm thinking as I'm filming things. And a lot of it's off script. I don't go into filming with a script. I go to places, I do a little research, and I pretty much discover them the same way that you'll discover them in the videos. Some of them work out. Some of them are complete busts. Some of them are somewhere in the middle. And this last trip I took was to Lake Talquin, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because when I asked one person down there to help me pronounce something, he proceeded to tell me about his life story and failed to tell me how to pronounce the river's name. But I've done a little research, and I've learned that it's Ochlockonee is the correct way to pronounce it. And it's an old Appalachian Indian word meaning yellow river. And as I was down there, it was more a muddy river. And as I was down there, I noticed the river was really low. And as you're going across the bridge there on I-10, you kind of get a glimpse of the Ochlockonee River. And it's what you would think northern Florida rivers would look like. It looked from that vantage point as black water, as most of those rivers are. I guess that's why it has its name, because it's, as you go through Lake Talquin and past the dam, it really becomes muddy, and that's probably a byproduct of the river, of the damming of the river. But it was a pretty place, and we had a little cabin, or one of the little houses, or tiny homes, if you will, for a couple of nights, and it was right on the river. It was in a little campground. I found it on Airbnb. It was called, I think, Nader's Place, Nader, if you'd like to look it up. I'll add a few pictures here, and I'll probably put a link to the cabin itself in the show notes. But the accommodations were adequate. It's not the Ritz-Carlton. It's not even a Days Inn. It's a tiny house. And it was comfortable for 2 nights. I don't think I'd want to stay there any longer. The views weren't great. I mean, it was a pretty little place in its own unique way. But as far as, going to relax, it wasn't as quiet and secluded. It was right next to a boat ramp, and it was a fairly busy boat ramp. And people would park and come down to the river and fish. And some of the people partook in certain herbs, if you catch my meaning. And the last morning we were there, as we walked out of the cabin, the odor of that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I don't think I could have sat out there in my rocking chair and enjoyed the scenery with that smell wafting up the little bank there, probably about 10 feet of bank up to where I was at. But the guy who owned it, or the campground manager there, was extremely accommodating, very nice guy. He's the one that I asked how to pronounce Ochlockonee, and he proceeded to tell me about how a certain hurricane, I forgot which one, had wiped him out in Central Florida, and he made his way up to Northwest Florida. And he got into politics a little bit, and I don't like to get into politics with people because I probably don't see eye to eye with them, so I just kind of nod and smile and go about my business. But it was a decent trip. We went down to, and you'll see these come along in the shows that I do. We went down to San Marcos de Appalachia, or something to that effect. I'm not very good with my Spanish and Indian names, or native names. But it was a really interesting place. It's where pretty much Europeans got a foothold in the go on the northern Gulf Coast, and you'll see the video I have of it, and I'll tell a story in some of them, and you'll see it coming up. It was a really nice place to really go and soak up a little history because it had been through so many hands, and so many people have fought and died right there, including the Appalachian Native Americans who were there first, obviously, then the Spanish, then the English, then the Americans, then the Confederates, then the Americans again. And you start thinking about how many people died right there on that spot. And there's a boat ramp right there. Is a park, and there's a boat ramp that people put into the two rivers that come together right there. And you wonder how many people stop and think about how many people died at the place they're putting in their boats and going out to fish or out to the Gulf, or, you know, you don't really think they sit there and they think about it. But I think about things like that. And as I look out across there, I'm different. I can hear and I can see things. I'm not saying literally, but in my mind, I can see things that probably happened there. And I guess, like I said, I'm put together differently. I think about things a lot differently than most people. I guess that's why I write, because I think about things. And a lot of times those are the stories that I come up with. But that was a neat little place, and it had a museum there, and a nice guy was in charge of it. And he told us how to, take the little trail around the fort there. And we went back in there, and there was like an 18-minute video that we sat there and watched him. And I recorded it, but I'm not going to put a whole lot out there because, number one, copyright issues. Number two, I think you need to go see it for yourself. But I will put a little bit out there just to kind of bait you into going down there, because I think it's something people need to see on their own. And we left there, and we went up to a place called Natural Bridge Battlefield. And I've been to several battlefields, and this one was one I put in the category of a bust. There was a monument, and I'll put a picture of the monument up, to the people who fought there. And this was when I think the British, I'm trying to remember what I've learned, the British made their way around the fort down there at the confluence of the rivers and went upstream. And then, no, actually, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. It was the Union Army that made its way around trying to get up to Tallahassee. And they were fought back there at the Battle of Natural Bridge, second largest Civil War battle in Florida. And the Confederates beat them back there. But as you go up there, there's not a whole lot there. And there's not a whole lot to kind of guide you along to where the battle actually took place. So I did a little filming. I took a few pictures, and it will make an episode, but I just wanted you to know that a lot of the places I go to are not what I expect, and this place was definitely not what I expected. And speaking of places I did not expect, the next day we went up to Lake Jackson Mounds, just by in Tallahassee, just to the north of Tallahassee. And it was pretty much a bust. There was one big mound there. It was overgrown. It was not well taken care of. And it makes me wonder why people even want to kind of advertise that as a park. There are a couple of picnic pavilions, and the mound there is just like it's in disrepair. So I decided to go home back to the Wiregrass via Ochlockonee Mounds in Georgia. So I drove about 80 miles north to Ochlockonee Mounds, and that was a little bit better experience. The park is beautiful. The lake is beautiful. I mean, it is a very pretty place to visit. The mounds are very accessible, and you could actually walk to the top of the Temple Mound, they call it. And I've got a lot of video of that. I've got pictures of that. Now, my calves were hurting about an hour later because it's a pretty steep climb, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the place. And then we wrapped up the trip and back home. And I tell that little story just to tell you that not all historic trips are things that work out. But you gather a little bit of everything, or a little bit from everywhere you go, let me say. I have a better understanding of the Civil War in Northwest Florida. I have a better understanding of, I don't want to call it the European invasion of Northwest Florida, what it pretty much was against the Appalachian people. And we'll talk about that more later. But I like to look at it from the different perspectives. And I think this trip did that. I like to look at it through the eyes of the natives. I like to look through the eyes of the Spanish, the English. And there's no better way than actually going to these places, seeing it for yourself. That's why I say the best teacher of history is not in a textbook, it's not in a classroom, it's actually going out and looking for yourself. And I think that's something that's failing in the world today. A lot of these places I go, they're completely empty. There's nobody there, or there are very few people there. And if they're there, they're not there for the history. And I think that's tragic. And if you ever want recommendations or anything like that, just shoot me a message. I've got my contact all over the place. I'm not hard to find, especially at pelhampew.com. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about that trip while it was fresh on my mind. And because I'm going to be doing some videos about it coming on through 2026. I got a couple other places I'm going to visit, and I'll talk about them as we go along. But in the next episode, I'm going to get back to myself and my family and my background. I talked a lot about my grandparents on my father's side. I'd like to dedicate the next episode that we do to my grandparents on my mother's side. And that'll be coming up probably in the next episode, like I said. Anyway, if you have any questions, like I said, it's always kind of shoot me a message. I'll be glad to talk to you. And if you're so inclined, like my books are out there, I'm not going to push them on you like a used car salesman because I hate being sold to. But if you need me for anything, I'll be around, and I'll talk to you later.